In this episode, we're going to focus on a problem that causes more security failure than many beginners expect: communication bottlenecks. A bottleneck is a place where work slows down because information, decisions, or approvals cannot flow smoothly. In security, bottlenecks are especially dangerous because delays do not just hurt efficiency. They can keep vulnerabilities open longer, slow incident containment, and cause teams to make changes without proper review because the official path feels too slow. Communication bottlenecks are also sneaky because people often experience them as normal, like this is just how the organization works, even when they are silently increasing risk. Our goal here is to learn how to spot where communication is breaking down and to remove barriers in a way that makes security execution faster, clearer, and more reliable without creating chaos. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Communication and security is not only about sending messages. It is about moving the right information to the right people at the right time so decisions and actions can happen. When that movement fails, security tasks drift, exceptions become permanent, and incidents spread further than they should. A beginner might assume the main barriers are technical, but many delays come from human systems. Unclear ownership, fear of blame, inconsistent terminology, and overloaded decision makers. Sometimes the bottleneck is a single person who must approve everything, and sometimes it is a process that requires multiple handoffs where no one is sure who has the next step. Bottlenecks also appear when security uses a communication style that is too technical for non-security teams, because confusion creates delay and delay creates risk. Removing barriers starts with treating communication as part of the security system, not as an extra layer around it. One of the most common bottlenecks is unclear escalation, meaning people do not know who to contact or when to raise an issue. In that situation, problems sit in silence because everyone assumes someone else is handling it, or because the person who notices the problem is unsure whether it is serious enough to interrupt others. This is especially harmful during incidents, where minutes matter and hesitation can multiply damage. Clear escalation is not about encouraging panic. It is about defining predictable paths so people can act quickly without fear of being wrong. When escalation paths are vague, people wait until the problem is obvious, and by then containment is harder. Removing this barrier often involves making escalation rules visible, simple, and supported by leadership so people know they will be backed when they raise legitimate concerns. Another bottleneck comes from decision congestion, where too many security decisions rely on a small number of people. This is common when security is centralized and every exception, review, or approval funnels through a few senior individuals. At first, this may feel safer because decisions are consistent, but over time it creates delays and it prevents teams from learning to make good security decisions locally. It also makes security execution fragile because if the key decision maker is unavailable, work stalls. A healthier approach is to delegate decision rights with clear boundaries, so routine decisions can be made at the right level while higher-risk decisions still escalate. This requires defining criteria, such as what changes are low risk and can be approved quickly, what changes need deeper review, and what changes require leadership acceptance of risk. When decision-making is distributed thoughtfully, security becomes faster without becoming careless. Communication bottlenecks also appear when teams use different language for the same thing or the same language for different things. For example, one team may use the word critical to mean business critical, while another uses it to mean technically severe, and those are not always the same. When words are inconsistent, people talk past each other, and decisions become delayed because everyone keeps clarifying. In security, ambiguity can be costly because it creates misunderstandings about urgency, scope, and expected outcomes. Removing this barrier often involves agreeing on a few shared definitions for common terms like severity, priority, incident, exception, and owner. This is not about creating a glossary for its own sake. It is about reducing friction so a message can be understood quickly by different teams. Shared language also helps prevent emotional conflict because fewer messages are interpreted as accusations or exaggeration. Another major barrier is the way information is packaged. Security teams sometimes communicate in long, dense messages filled with technical detail, which can overwhelm non-security stakeholders who are trying to make fast decisions. When stakeholders cannot quickly understand the problem and the requested action, they delay, avoid, or respond defensively. This creates a bottleneck where security waits for decisions that never arrive, and the risk remains open. Clear packaging means stating what the issue is, what it affects, what the risk is in practical terms, and what the next action should be, all in language the audience can understand. Detailed evidence can still exist, but it should be available as supporting material rather than being the only message. When security communicates clearly, other teams can act faster, and the security team spends less time repeating itself. A related barrier is missing context, where a request arrives without enough information to act on it. For example, a remediation ticket might say a vulnerability exists but not specify which systems are affected, what their criticality is, or what the target timeline should be. The receiving team then has to ask questions, wait for answers, and often place the work behind other tasks because the urgency is unclear. This kind of back and forth is a communication bottleneck that can be fixed by designing better handoffs. Better handoffs include standard fields like asset owner, business impact, exposure window, and recommended priority based on risk. When handoffs are complete, teams spend less time clarifying and more time executing. This improves both speed and accountability because responsibilities and expectations are visible from the start. Fear of blame is another bottleneck that beginners often underestimate. When people believe that raising a security issue will get them punished or embarrassed, they hide problems until they become unavoidable. That behavior is a communication barrier because it prevents early intervention, which is usually cheaper and less disruptive. A healthy security culture encourages early reporting by responding constructively, focusing on fixing systems rather than attacking individuals. This does not mean ignoring negligence. It means separating honest mistakes and structural gaps from intentional misconduct. When people see that security responds fairly and professionally, they are more likely to share bad news early. That early sharing reduces the size of incidents and reduces the number of surprises that leadership must manage, which is a direct improvement in security posture. Communication barriers also show up when the organization's channels are fragmented, meaning different teams use different tools and routines to communicate, and information gets lost in the gaps. The result is that security tasks can stall because the security team sent information in a place the receiving team does not monitor, or because the status update is buried in a long thread that no one revisits. Fragmentation can also create conflicting narratives, where different groups have different versions of what is happening because they are not sharing the same updates. Removing this barrier does not require a single universal channel for everything, but it does require defining where certain kinds of security communication should happen and how it will be tracked. For example, incident coordination should have a predictable channel and a predictable reporting cadence so stakeholders know where to look. Remediation work should have a trackable system so status is visible and not dependent on memory. Once you can identify bottlenecks, the next step is removing them in a way that strengthens execution rather than just speeding up communication noise. This means changing processes, decision paths, and expectations, not simply telling people to communicate better. If the bottleneck is unclear ownership, you assign owners and make ownership visible. If the bottleneck is decision congestion, you define decision rights and delegate routine approvals. If the bottleneck is poor handoffs, you improve the information that must accompany requests. If the bottleneck is fear of blame, you change how leaders respond to early reporting and how mistakes are handled. If the bottleneck is fragmented channels, you establish clear coordination points and tracking methods. Each fix should aim to reduce delay and reduce ambiguity, because those are the two most common sources of communication-driven risk. It is also important to watch for unintended consequences when removing barriers, because faster communication is not always better if it creates confusion. For example, if you create too many escalation paths, people may not know which one to use, and coordination can become chaotic. If you delegate decisions without clear criteria, Different teams may make inconsistent choices that create new risk. If you simplify messages too much, you might remove critical context and cause poor decisions. This is why good barrier removal includes feedback and adjustment, not just a one-time change. You implement a change, you observe whether the flow improves, and you refine the approach to keep it both fast and accurate. The goal is a steady, reliable communication system, not constant urgency. When communication bottlenecks are reduced, security execution becomes smoother in multiple ways. Vulnerabilities are prioritized and fixed faster because ownership and urgency are clear. Incidents are contained sooner because escalation is predictable and decision-makers are reachable. Exceptions become less common and less permanent because the process is not painful, so teams use the official path instead of avoiding it. Cross-functional trust improves because teams feel security is helping work move forward safely rather than slowing everything down. Over time, improved communication flow reduces operational stress because fewer issues reach crisis levels. That is why identifying and removing communication barriers is not a soft skill separate from security. It is a core part of how security posture improves in real organizations.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.